Alright, Fishy. It's a Devil May Cry themed run, but don't play the song. It's too predictable. Everyone will see it coming. Don't play the song. The ancient Meteoric or Greatsword is one of the coolest weapons in the game. And despite the fact I'm not the biggest fan of colossal weapons in general, is actually one of my favourites. So we're going to head into the DLC to grab it early. In the last video I did a detailed guide of how to get to the DLC early regardless of your skill. So if it's your first time doing an early DLC run, go check out that video for the early game. To start this run, I did my setup, cheesed the Knights Cavalry and killed Grail for levels. Then I rode round Liurnia, Limgrave, Caelid and Altus to grab these bits. The first boss is going to be Godskin Noble, and as I'm not fond of the hero's axe for that fight, I headed into the Black Knife Catacombs in Limgrave to grab the Uchi. While I was in the area, I went to see our old friend to convince him to give me his shard. Then down to the hero's grave right at the start of the game to grab the Dragon Communion seal. For Noble, craft some sleep pots and put him to sleep. Do 2 unsheaths, then spam R1 to stagger. Throw another pot straight after the riposte, then the same again for the kill. So this week I wanted to try another weapon for Radahn and Mohg. And as we need a ton of endurance for this build, I needed something that would do really good damage with minimal stat investment. So to Rykard's Arena to grab Serpent Hunter. And at +9, the challenge runner's favourite weapon absolutely demolishes Radahn. He would have been dead in phase 1 here, but I didn't have the spike crack tier equipped. Despite that, it's still not a problem. Then I did Vare's questline for access to the palace. With the shackle, this would be a scripted fight. However, as I hadn't bothered with it, I had to fight a little with his phase 2. But just by playing it safe and taking it slow, this is a pretty easy one with Serpent Hunter. Now into the Shadowlands. Right at the beginning, grab the Blade of Mercy for later. Then, after following my DLC setup guide, it's time to go get our gear. We need to head towards the Shadow Keep, so I went through the Morth Ruins and up towards the back entrance. Grabbed a fragment on this statue. Now up to light the back section grace, then drop down to the first floor. From here, down the elevator to find the secret room by the boats, and into the coffin towards the ruins of Unti. From here, we're going to head down the cliffs to find the mausoleum containing Rakshasa. She's a pretty tough boss, but we have Serpent Hunter. And absolutely no fucking vigor. Okay, so we'll park that for a sec to go grab our weapon for the run. You can find the ancient Meteoric or Greatsword in the ruined forge of Starfall Past, but I'm not going to spoil the little puzzle to get to it, as it's a good one. In the same ruins, you'll also find the Somber 7 and 8 we need to upgrade it. Then to Castle Ensis to kill the Golem outside for a Somber 9. For the Somber 5 and 6, I went back to the base game for the one off the Kaled Swamp and the one in Mount Gelmir. But you can actually find a 5 and 6 in Castle Ensis as well. Now back to Rakshasa. As it happens, the Ancient Or Greatsword is one of the few weapons in the game that can trivialise this fight at this level. Stick on the Karia Knight armour from the setup to stop yourself getting one shot. The weapon art of the Greatsword will stun lock Rakshasa. For the safest fight, you want to wait until she is idling to use it. Do not use it while she is attacking, or she will hyper armor throw it and kill you. Once you've hit with it, you're safe to use it just as you see her start to get up. This is the kind of fight that might not be first try, but it's not one that's going to take you many attempts. So now we've got to the DLC and grabbed our stuff, it's time to get some more sensible stats for the rest of the game. So head back to Raya Lucaria. Even though we're very over leveled, fighting Red Wolf of Radagon can be difficult with big weapons. So the strategy is to now for Renala, who as another NPC enemy doesn't really stand a chance. And if you wanted to keep blasting through the base game, this amount of vigor is fine. But I wanted to do a couple of DLC bosses for more runes, so I wanted to respec to a more balanced stat distribution. Before heading back to the DLC, I wanted another talisman slot, so it was time to bully Margit. To fill that slot, I headed into the Lakeside Crystal Cave in Liurnia for the Spear Talisman. The Spear Talisman boosts piercing attack damage while counter-attacking, which means it's going to be absolutely amazing for this build. Back to the DLC for my favourite boss for seeing what a weapon is all about. So the good news for this sword is that the weapon art is incredible for closing distance in this fight. The bad news is the R1s and R2s can get you in trouble because of the recovery time. So like all colossal weapons, greed will get you killed incredibly quickly. My favourite attack in this weapon's moveset is the rolling R1, as it comes out super quick, deals pierce damage, and because of this weapon's size, also does pretty good posture damage. Speaking of posture damage, for the early game I'd grabbed Dragonmaw in case the Greatsword didn't work for Rakshasa. But since this was the one time in the entire run that I used it, you can save yourself leveling the Dragon Communion Seal if you want to go melee. But it's really good at low stat investment if you do want to use some incantations on this build too. For R'hllana, I tried the Greatsword out as a parry weapon, and as you might expect, it's great. If you're being safe, do not attack her between parries. When you've got this much armor and vigor though, you can brute force the second half of the health bar for a fun bully fight. Now down to the Cerulean Coast for the Putrescent Knight. And again, for a boss that moves around like this, the Ash of War is great for closing up the distance when you need to. With the Knight's lower posture, you can also go for charged attacks and posture breaks. So now I'd got enough faith for Golden Vow, I had a spare slot in my physic. So back to the base game for the Northeast Kaled Avatar for the Stone Barb Crack Tip. And here's what adding that into this build does to enemies with 80 poise. After Godfrey is down, and we have our full talisman slot open, back to the DLC, to the Templetown ruins for another fragment and the two-handed sword talisman. And here's what all of that does to Morgoth. For Fire Giant, the weapon art is great for getting to that foot a little bit quicker than you usually would. But with a Colossal Greatsword and Stone Barb, you don't need any additional help with this fight. Not much to report on duo. You could probably one-cycle them with the sleep cheese if you did them separately. Or have a really chilled parry fight with this damage if you wanted to. Now for what is undoubtedly one of my favourite ever Malakath fights. For Godfrey, it's actually really hard to set up a phase 2 stagger with this weapon, as it actually does a bit too much posture damage. Happily though, get stuck in, and you can still have a very satisfying fight. For Radagon, I'll just let this one play. Now back to the DLC to brute force your way through the Romina fight. Of all of the 80 Boys bosses, Romina is probably the one who can put up the biggest fight against this insane posture damage because of all her movement. But as soon as she stands still, now even if you're like me and absolutely detest the leather fight, killing Hornsent is still optional on this run, due to the weapon up. But I headed back to the Shadow Keep to do it mainly so I can show you how good the Hippo fight is with Stone Barb and a Colossal Sword. Messmer is one of the most fun fights with this kind of build and weapon. We have the health, armor, and posture damage to just brute force it if you like. However, trying to find safe spots for massive charges is incredibly satisfying. And the extra mobility we have from the light charge makes the more hectic phase 2 very exciting. Now for some revenge. I fancy doing a no parry fight with Captain Roll Left. The rolling R1 is particularly useful for in between attacks while you wait for those bigger openings to get charged R2s in. And although there's still some stuff to do, I've really run out of things to say about this weapon. Spam charges for staggers, works great for parries, and the weapon art gives you the perfect combination of extra mobility and insane damage. If only I could think of a song to use for an outro montage. Oh well, thanks for watching.